Good morning for everyone who is here.
Good morning, teacher.
Good morning. Let's start our lesson. Today we will discuss, students, the higher functions of the nervous system, brain, such as the sleeping mechanism, memory, emotions, motivation, learning, and so on. And I would like to start from the mechanism of sleep. So let's clarify the mechanisms, theories, and everything about sleep. Sleep is a natural, mandatory, cyclic behavioral state which is important for the restoration of physical and mental forces. Actually, when I always ask the students, what do you think, what is the sleep, and how do you await the state of brain activity, brain cells, they always answer that it is the slowing down of the neurons activity, brain is just switching off, and that is we're falling asleep. Actually, it's not in this way, because during sleeping, except slowing down neuronal activity, we have also stages where the neurons are again getting active, and even under EEG, we can find out the brain waves, which is situable in the case of the awakeness. So that is, students, we have several stages. We have divided the sleeping stages into different stages and phases, which is important to understand. First of all, that stage of close to awakeness, the brain waves when getting active, were discovered by the researcher, young founder by William Demand in 1952. What he observed in his laboratory when he was researching the sleeping individuals, he saw that on EEG, the waves are suddenly changed from the slow waves into the fast waves. That's why he was amazed, and he tried to understand what's going on here exactly. And what is interesting, except the changing in the waves, he observed that the sleeping one is started breathing faster, heart rate seems like increased, he is sweating, and the main important thing, he observed that the eyes are dark around and moving very fast. So that's why he named even this phase the REM phase, which means the rapid eye movement phase. So, and he wrote in his memory, students, he made a really big discovery about which today we can talk. He wrote in his memories that I was a typical medical student, stayed in an empty building, and I made amazing discoveries one by one. So as you see, he was the young medical student when he observed, researched the sleeping mechanisms, and he made big discovery. So here we see him also, he's already old here. And the Americans considered him to be the father of sleep medicine because he made big works on sleep disorders, especially in the sleep apnea and narcolepsy, sleep deprivation, and the sleep mechanism generally. So how you see from the screen, so we have the slow phase sleep and the fast phase sleep. Fast phase, you already know, it's the REM phase, rapid eye movement phase, which was discovered. Slow sleep phase, it is distinguished as the non-REM sleep. Let's see what kind of changes occur due to these two phases. And before I will explain the changes, let me inform you that this most percentage is the slow sleep phase. It's around 75%, and it consists from the several stages starting from 1 to 4, whereas the REM sleep phase is only 25%. And under slow sleep phase, we observe the slowing brain waves, breathing slows, saliva production is reduced, so even sometimes we'll wake up and we'll feel the dry mouth. the blood pressure and body temperature drops, muscles are paralyzed. Whereas under fast sleep phase, REM phase, this is the state very close to awakeness, as I mentioned above. The brain waves are the faster, the heartbeat increases, blood pressure rises, eyes darts around, breathing becomes rapid, and despite all these things, all the muscles are paralyzed. This is the main characteristics of the fast sleep phase. Of course, all the muscles are paralyzed except the muscles of eye and respiration, because you already know they are getting activated. How they are getting activated, all these mechanisms we will discuss today. Here we can see that stage of non-REM phase, which is starting from the first stage. The first stage is the stage between the wakefulness and the sleep students. It's when we are just trying to fall asleep. We lie on the bed, we are closing our eyes, we are relaxed. So sometimes we'll have dreamlike hallucinations. At this moment on EEG, we observe alpha rhythm. So you already know it, that when eyes are closed, but brain is still active, not sleeping, awake, we have alpha rhythm on EEG. Then it's being followed by the stage 2, where it's already quickened alpha rhythm is also being replaced by the theta rhythm. In this phase, it's very easy to wake up, but we are already asleep. So in the stage 2, we fall asleep. Despite the falling asleep, it's very spatial sleeping, so we can wake up very easily. Stage 3 is already deeper. Waves see the theta waves under EEG, and whereas it's being followed by the stage 4, it's very deep sleep. It is the deepest sleep through in these 4 stages. And in this stage, it's hard to wake up. Each non-REM phase, how you can see, is followed by the REM phase. So REM phase is inserted inside of the non-REM phase during all time of sleeping, and it's being continued around 4 and 5 times, and each 90 minutes of non-REM phase sleeping, around 15-20 minutes insertion of the REM phase of sleeping. Both phases are important, students. They have their own functions. And what kind of functions? Let's clarify. Under a slow phase of sleep, students, there is mainly the physical functions are restored. So at this time, the process of renewal of cells occur, energy is restored, muscles grow. So this is important very for the physical functions. Hormones are released. You already know from the hormones. We have discussed it with you. If you remember, I have mentioned that there is hormones which are being secreted due to circadian rhythms. It's one of the ways of the secretion of the hormones. And there's such hormones as the melatonin is highest concentration at night, cortisol decreases very suddenly. And if you remember, anabolic hormones levels were highest at night hours. So that is testosterone, growth hormone concentration highest. So these hormones exactly are causing the body growth, muscle growth, bone growth. So during the fast phase sleep, which is the REM phase of sleeping, the mental and emotional functions are taking place, students. At this time, the nervous system is restored, information is processed, memory is prepared, consolidation of the memory occurs. So how you already understand, the fast phase sleep is very important, mainly for the mental functions of the body. Of course, as I mentioned, deprivation from one or another phase will lead to the complications such as the aggression, not satisfaction, restfulness, and both are important for the normal body functioning. There is a point which I would like to take into your attention, that sometimes in such a disorders like insomnia, when people are not having trouble with the falling asleep and they are being persisted to take the drugs to provide their normal sleeping, in this case, students, even the brain waves and the brain phases are changed in a different way, that people are not having this natural oscillation of the waves. They are not oscillating through these two phases. They don't have, let's say, a REM phase at all. They are just remaining in the one phase, which is the non-REM phase, and they cannot very easily insert to the REM phase. But you will ask me, okay, you told that the deprivation from one or another phase will lead to the complications, and if they take their drugs and if they are not oscillating naturally through this all waves and phases, why they are waking up in the morning and they are satisfied with their sleeping, they are not getting aggressive or some other complications. I will tell you that that drug students also, if we will look to their content, they have in their content, we see that substances which has the influence to the pleasure centers, dopaminergic receptors, they are causing the release of the pleasure transmitters, which promote their satisfaction, even they're not having all these normal phases during sleeping. So of course it's not a good condition, and everything is good in natural ways. So that's why this is the main differences between the natural sleeping mechanism and the sleeping under the medications or sleeping drugs. The same is also observed students under anesthesia. Anesthesia, it's the drug-induced sleeping. Of course, under anesthesia, we don't have this kind of natural oscillation and changes in the phases. It keeps in only one phase. Okay, so here I would like to show you some waves. As I mentioned, we will clarify that waves very deep later. So at first stage, we see here the first stage of non-REM sleeping. We observe the alpha waves, as I mentioned, when we are just trying to fall asleep. At the second stage, we are already sleeping, we observe the theta waves. But what is interesting, at the second stage, under EEG, we see the spondals. Spondal students is spondal is the bursts of the brain activity. They play an essential role in both sensory processing and long-term memory consolidation. So the spondals are generated in the nucleus of the thalamus. It's very important. It helps with the mental restoration. It works, and the sensory inputs occur exactly in this stage. The stage 3, it's the theta waves. It's already, we are entering to the deep sleep, and the stage 4, as you see here, is already delta waves, which is the deepest stage. And here's the REM phase student. At the REM phase, pay attention, we have the fastened brain waves, and also we see here eye movement phase. Pay attention, these waves are the eye movement waves. Here we find out the brain activity, the neurons activity during the non-REM and REM sleeping. You see with the red color shows the brain neuronal activity. On the REM or fast phase, neurons are so active, whereas at non-REM phase, the red colors are very less. It means the neurons are not active and their activity is slowing down. Here we see the brain activity under the drugs, which are keeping the sleeping for a long time, narcotic content drugs. And here is the very deep sleeping. You see the very slow activity of the neurons. The blue colors are dominant here. And let's continue. So this is, here we see the scientists who made discoveries year by years. They have clarified the theories mainly which lead to the sleeping. So the factors which are causing sleeping. For example, the Bremer scientist, he discovered that the sleeping is just occurred due to decrease of sensory input. It leads to the calm of the neurons, and that's why the person is falling asleep. Giuseppe Morese and Horacio Magun, they are find out the mechanism, which is due to just the let's say due to the several cuts in the different parts of the brain. They have applied the experiments on the cats, and they found out that when, by the separating the several parts of the brain, it's influenced to the brain activity. And in one moment, we can see that the cat just fall asleep, very deep sleep, and it was really hard to wake up the animal. Here we also can see the brain parts were investigated also with the help of the stimulation of several structures. Except the cutting, we can find out research by the stimulating exact parts, and it shows that the thalamic reticular nucleus plays a very important role in the awake and the sleeping cycles. Exactly. When they cut the brainstem under the reticular formation, they have observed that the brain activity is very high, and they have observed on EEG active brain waves, exactly beta waves. But when they separated the reticular nucleus of the brainstem from the other parts of the brain structures, they have observed that there is a animal fall asleep onto deep sleep, and the brain waves was the deep sleep waves, very slow waves. By this way, they have discovered that the reticular nucleus are the activating system, so they are working to keep the brain cells active, exactly cortex consciousness, so they are playing a big role in the awake and the sleeping cycles. As I mentioned above, you should know it already even from analyzers that all the sensory input students, they reach the cortex through thalamic reticular formation, from brainstem reticular formation and from thalamic nuclei to the cortex. So except by the way, which sensory input, which is passing directly to the cortex but not through thalamus? Any ideas? Which sensation doesn't reach the cortex through thalamus? Kausar is absent, that's why there is no answers. Hashim Mohammed, any ideas?
No, teacher. Except the olfaction, students. Olfaction doesn't reach the cortex through thalamus. It's the only sensory input which goes directly to the cortex memory. So that sensory inputs, of course, one of the theories of keeping the brain awake, and it has also essential role. Why? Because any sensory input, let's say any loud sound or touching during sleeping, will awake us from the sleeping, and that's why they also play a big role. And the reticular nucleus, the reticular formation of the brainstem, considered to be the activating system which keeps the brain active. We have several nucleus. We can see here the dorsal raphe nucleus, pedunculopontine parabrachial nucleus, ventral tegmental nucleus, locus coeruleus. All these nuclei are students working through hypothalamus, thalamus, and they reach the cortex, keep the brain active. They work through several neurotransmitters. So these neurotransmitters are norepinephrine, serotonin, histamine, acetylcholine, dopamine. And these neurotransmitters are important to keep the brain active. And sometimes those patients who suffer from allergy, students, and when they use the antihistaminic drugs, it's observed that they are sleepy all time
their concentration decreased and brain is not so active. Brain is struggling to be concentrated on something. So that is, we understand already why, because you see that the histamine is one of the neurotransmitters which provides the activity of the neurons. But in this case, when they use that drugs, they are antihistaminic drugs. They just block the receptors through which the histamine works, and that is their concentration decreases and they feel sleepy during whole day. And even in the instructions of that drugs, we can even find out, read that they suggest to not do the things which are requiring their concentration, for example, not to drive the car and so on. So several things which requires concentration, it's not suggested to do under the influence of that drugs. Okay, so now let's see closer the mechanisms, exactly how that sleeping occur, how the brain is switched off and we fall asleep. For this purpose, we have the two influences, students. One is the slow changing influences, another is the rapid changes. Slow changes, we understand like circadian rhythms and the homeostatic drive. All these factors work during the day. So that is the slow changes. For example, melatonin, you already know, we go to sleep according to the time of the day, but we have the rapid changes. It doesn't look to the time or there is no actually at all homeostatic drive for this, but it occurs very fast. So we go from being awake to sleep instantly, randomly. And let's see how all these processes occur. For the slow changes, as I mentioned, so exactly, let's say daylight, when the light reaches the retina, through retina, it goes to the suprachiasmatic nuclei, where they are sending the inhibitory signals to the parts of the hypothalamus, and of course through which the signals will reach the spinal cord, superior cervical ganglion and pineal gland, and all the system how you already see, which are responsible for the release of melatonin from pineal gland, is inhibited due to daylight. So this is the circadian rhythm. This is how at daylight the brain is being kept awake and active. So of course, when it is dark, this inhibitory system is not going to work, and all the system which is responsible for the release of melatonin will work for the secretion of melatonin, and we will feel like we're already ready to sleep and want to sleep. According to the fast influences, as I mentioned, we have very fast switching of the brain and we fall asleep immediately. They are working through, students, the hypothalamic nuclei. So how you already understand, reticular formation together with hypothalamus is regulating, controlling our wake and sleeping cycles and brain activity. So in ventrolateral preoptic hypothalamic nucleus, we find the group of neurons which are switching off the tubulomammillary nucleus, which are responsible for the awakeness. So at night, it's believed that the accumulation of adenosine also activates the nucleus of ventrolateral preoptic hypothalamus, which are inhibiting very fast directly the nuclei which are responsible for the awakeness. Here I would like also to take into your attention that why we feel concentrated and we are not sleepy when we are drinking the coffee or dark tea, through which mechanism exactly it's influenced and keeps our brain awake. I would like to mention that it works through adenosine receptors, students. So coffee blocks the receptors in ventrolateral preoptic nuclei, which are through which the adenosine influence to that nucleus. And of course, however, for a period of time, it keeps the brain active and just like helps to be awake for a while, a period, of course. So this is the one of mechanisms how to keep how it works to keep the brain awake. Of course, when we turn off this, when this nuclei, turning off the hypothalamic nuclei, which are responsible for awakeness, we immediately switch off and we're falling asleep. The awakeness occurs, students, when ventrolateral preoptic nuclei are inhibited at daylight. Pay attention, at daylight through suprachiasmatic nucleus also are being sent the excitatory signals to the dorsomedial hypothalamus, from where GABA is released. GABA is the gamma aminobutyric acid, which is the inhibitory neurotransmitter, which is inhibiting the neurons which are responsible for sleeping. So how I already understand, at daylight, this system, sleeping part, sleeping nuclei which are responsible for the switching of the brain are inhibited. Also, activation of the awakeness part nuclei, which activation will lead to reciprocal inhibition of the sleeping nuclei, occur under the influence of hypocretin. It's the substance known also as the orexin, which is released in lateral hypothalamus. Daylight is the stimulant for the release of this substance, students. And at daylight, hypocretin also excites the tubular mammillary nucleus in hypothalamus, which is inhibiting the sleeping nuclei. This system works rapidly, you already know it, randomly. And sometimes there is a disorders with the concentration of hypocretin. In some cases, the secretion is decreased very low, so as that patients can just fall asleep immediately. It causes the muscle atony, very sudden decrease in muscle tone, and they fall asleep very suddenly. It's of course very dangerous condition, because here we are not controlling our sleeping. Here we just fall very fast, falling asleep. Of course, it's dangerous because we are not always in that comfortable conditions. It may occur in the street, it may occur in the room. So in this case, they suffer from these conditions, students. So this is the main mechanism, students, for the sleeping. You already understand it, how these processes occur, and I would like to talk a little bit the pathological types of sleeping, which is also important for you. We have pathological types of sleeping as the stupor, as the insomnia, coma. Let's clarify a little bit these pathological types of sleeping. Stupor, from Latin, it being translated like amazed, be stunned. It's the very acute lack of mental function. So it's the level of consciousness where a sufferer is entirely unresponsive to the irritant stimuli and only responds to the pain, let's say such kind of stimuli as the pain. So they are unresponsive to any sensory inputs. It's the acute, very acute decreased mental function. Insomnia, you already know what is this. We have talked about it. So they are troubling to fall asleep. There is, of course, they will have the problems with the focusing and learning. Their consolidation memory is absolutely disturbed. And there is different reasons for the students, but mainly it may be the such a chronic diseases as the psychological chronic stress, chronic pain, heart failures, hyperthyroidism. Sometimes the rest leg syndrome may cause the insomnia, and certain medications, and especially the cases when the medications are used together with the alcohol, let's say caffeine, nicotine, and so on. Coma, let's a little bit clarify what is the coma. Coma is the state of unconsciousness in which a person cannot be awakened, students. It sometimes works through the RAS. RAS, it is the reticular activation system. When it doesn't work, sometimes we call it barbiturate sleep. the different medications cause the switching of this reticular activating system. Different anesthesias work through this system. So the switching of this reticular activating system will also cause the condition known as coma. Several disorders can lead to coma, such as you already know from the previous topics. We have talked about it: ketoacidotic coma in diabetic patients, hypoglycemia also in diabetic patients, the uremia may cause the comas, hepatic comas. So due to intoxication, high levels of creatinine, bilirubin, you already know that all these conditions leads to the condition known as pathological coma. So this is and narcolepsy, I have mentioned it already. It's due to the lack of the substance circulating in the blood as the orexin or hypocretin. I have already mentioned it. And also what is interesting to know, the hypnosis is also another type of falling asleep, which is being controlled through the influences to the consciousness of the person. And that's all, I think, what is important for you to know. I would like to finish with the Sigmund Freud words, who was saying that dreams are the subconscious thoughts and desires that need to be analyzed. What does it mean? It means that if during the day we had some problems that we couldn't find an answers, the questions that we couldn't solve, they are being analyzed during the sleeping. And I'm sure that you even have observed in our own experiences when we wake up in the morning and we say that we couldn't find the answer during all day, but when we wake up in the morning, it's just suddenly we have ideas and answers how to solve it. So because this is really occur and unconsciousness conditions also. This may occur in unconscious conditions also. By the way, the dreaming occur, I didn't mention it, students, the dreaming occur during non-REM phase of sleeping. This is the phase of sleeping at which we are dreaming. Okay, do you have any questions?
No, teacher, thank you.
Okay, if no, let's make a little break and continue there a little bit. We will talk about the memory and learning, and that will be the last lesson. You know it already, I have mentioned.
Okay, sure.
Okay, let's make a little break and turn on to another presentation. So Zoom is breaking also. Let's re-enter, please.